Hi, I'm Elena Martinez and I'm 28 years old. 3 months ago, I was sleeping on my friend's couch with nothing but a broken laptop and $347 to my name. My own parents had thrown me out on the street, telling our neighbors I'd abandoned them for selfish dreams. I'd lost my home, my family, and nearly lost my sanity trying to be the perfect daughter who could never do enough. I thought I was worthless. I thought I deserved every cruel word, every guilt trip, every sleepless night wondering if I was truly the ungrateful monster they said I was. I believed them when they told me my art was worthless, that I was a burden, that no one would ever love me the way family does. I was wrong about everything. What I'm about to tell you isn't a success story, it's a survival story. It's about the moment I realized that sometimes the people who claim to love you the most are actually slowly killing your spirit. And when you finally find the strength to save yourself, they'll try to convince the entire world that you're the villain. Before we dive in, I need you to know something. If any part of this story sounds familiar, if you're sitting there thinking about your own impossible family situation, please keep reading. Because sometimes the most broken people find the strongest wings, and please hit the like and subscribe button. The late afternoon sun filtered through the dusty blinds of our small apartment in Queens, casting long shadows across the worn carpet. I sat at my laptop, fingers dancing across the keyboard as I finished up another freelance graphic design project. The deadline was tomorrow, but I'd learned long ago that tomorrow in the Martinez household meant yesterday when it came to my responsibilities. Elena! My mother's voice cut through the quiet like a knife. Where's the check for the electric bill? I glanced at the clock. 4:47 p.m. Right on schedule. Victoria Martinez had an internal alarm that went off every day around this time, reminding her to collect whatever money I'd managed to earn. In the envelope on the kitchen counter, Mama, I called back, not taking my eyes off the screen. The design I was working on, a logo for a small bakery in Brooklyn, needed just a few more tweaks before I could submit it and hopefully get paid within the week. My father, Miguel, shuffled into the living room wearing his usual uniform, yesterday's clothes and a scowl that seemed permanently etched into his weathered face. At 55, he looked older, worn down by years of failed business ventures and what he called bad luck. I called it poor choices and an inability to take responsibility, but I'd learned to keep those thoughts to myself. You finished that thing yet? He asked, nodding toward my laptop. Mrs. Chen from downstairs needs help moving furniture tomorrow. I told her you'd help. I paused mid-click. Dad, I have 3 client meetings tomorrow and I promised Sarah I'd help her with her wedding invitations. His expression darkened. Family comes first, Elena. Always. You can do your little art projects anytime. Little art projects. The phrase stung like it always did. Those little art projects had been paying their rent for the past 3 years, ever since Miguel's last business, a food truck that lasted exactly 6 weeks, went under. Those projects had covered Victoria's medical bills when she'd had her gallbladder removed. Those projects had kept the lights on when Miguel decided to invest their savings in cryptocurrency based on a tip from his drinking buddy. Of course, Dad, I said, closing the laptop. I'd learned that arguing only made things worse, and I needed their approval too much to risk another week of cold silence. Victoria appeared in the doorway, clutching a handful of bills. Mija, we need to talk about Christmas gifts this year. Your cousin Rosa is expecting something nice for her baby shower, and your Aunt Carmen. Mom, it's October, I interrupted gently. Planning ahead is important, she snapped. Not all of us can just live day by day like you young people. I bit back the irony. They were the ones living day by day, paycheck to paycheck, crisis to crisis, while I was the one planning months ahead, budgeting, saving, trying to build something resembling stability for all of us. That evening, as we sat around the small dining table eating takeout Chinese food, paid for with my latest client payment, I listened to my parents discuss their plans. Victoria wanted to redecorate the living room. Miguel thought they should take a vacation to Florida to visit his brother. We could stay for 2 weeks, Miguel said, opening another beer. Maybe 3. My back's been killing me and the doctor said warm weather would help. What about work? I asked carefully. What work? Miguel laughed bitterly. Nobody wants to hire a man my age. Besides, with all the money you're making with your computer stuff, we can afford to relax a little. The weight of their expectations settled on my shoulders like a lead blanket. This was how it always went. My success became their cushion, my hard work became their safety net, and my dreams became secondary to their comfort. After dinner, I retreated to my bedroom, a converted walk-in closet that barely fit a twin bed and a small desk. The walls were covered with my artwork, pieces I'd created during college, and the few personal projects I managed to squeeze in between client work and family obligations. Each drawing and painting represented a dream I'd put on hold, a vision of the life I wanted to build for myself. I opened my laptop and checked my bank account. After paying the electric bill, buying groceries, and covering my share of the rent, which somehow always ended up being more than half, I had $347 left. Not much, but enough to maybe finally start saving for my own place. My phone buzzed. A text from my best friend, Jessica. Coffee tomorrow? I have news about the gallery opening. Jessica worked at a small art gallery in Manhattan. For months, she'd been trying to convince me to submit some of my work for their emerging artists showcase. The opportunity could change everything: exposure, connections, maybe even enough sales to finally move out and start my own design studio. I stared at the text, finger hovering over the keyboard. Tomorrow was Mrs. Chen's furniture, my client meetings, and Sarah's wedding invitations. When would I have time for coffee? When would I have time for dreams? Rain check? Crazy day tomorrow, I typed back. Elena, you always have a crazy day. When are you going to start living your own life? I stared at her message for a long time before turning off the phone. Living my own life felt like a luxury I couldn't afford. Not when my parents needed me. Not when I was the only thing keeping our family afloat. But as I lay in bed that night, listening to my parents argue in the next room about money I'd given them, money I'd earned, Jessica's words echoed in my mind. When are you going to start living your own life? I didn't know the answer. I didn't even know what my own life would look like anymore. 3 months later, I stood in the kitchen at 6 a.m., making coffee and checking emails on my phone. The November air outside was crisp, promising the harsh winter that always made our heating bills skyrocket. I'd already calculated that I'd need to take on 2 extra projects just to cover the increased utilities, plus the money Victoria wanted for new winter clothes. Elena, thank God you're up. Victoria shuffled into the kitchen, still in her bathrobe, hair messy with sleep and worry. I need you to call your Aunt Maria today. I looked up from my phone. Why? She's having problems with Ramon again. Money problems. I told her you might be able to help design some flyers for his auto shop. For free? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Family doesn't charge family, Mija. Besides, you're so talented it wouldn't take you long. I sipped my coffee, feeling the familiar tightness in my chest. Mom, I'm already working on 6 different projects. And I promised Jessica I'd. Jessica this, Jessica that, Victoria waved her hand dismissively. That girl is filling your head with nonsense. Art galleries, showcases, that's not real work, Elena. That's fantasy. It's not fantasy. It's called having ambition. The words slipped out before I could stop them. Victoria's face hardened. Ambition? You think we don't have ambition? You think your father and I haven't worked hard our entire lives? Her voice rose, filling the small kitchen. Everything we do is for family, for you. And this is how you repay us? By calling us unambitious. Miguel appeared in the doorway, drawn by the raised voices. What's going on? Your daughter thinks she's too good to help her aunt. Too busy with her ambitions to care about family. I felt the familiar pattern beginning, the twist of my words, the guilt, the way my desire for independence became selfishness in their eyes. That's not what I said. It's exactly what you said, Miguel's voice was low, dangerous. You know what your problem is, Elena? You're ungrateful. We've given you everything and you can't even do a simple favor for your aunt. I didn't say I wouldn't help Aunt Maria. I just said I'm busy with paying work. Oh, so now we're not worth your time unless we pay you? Victoria's eyes filled with tears, the weapon she wielded whenever she sensed she was losing ground. I can't believe I raised such a selfish daughter. The tears were my kryptonite. They always had been. The sight of my mother crying made my chest tighten with guilt so intense it felt like drowning. I set down my coffee cup, hands shaking slightly. I'll call Aunt Maria today, I said quietly. Thank you, Victoria wiped her eyes with theatrical precision. Sometimes I wonder what happened to the sweet little girl who used to draw pictures for Mama. I remembered that little girl. She'd drawn pictures of flowers and hearts and given them to Victoria with such pride, such hope that maybe this time they'd be enough. That maybe this time she'd earned the unconditional love she saw other children receive. That little girl had never learned that love shouldn't have conditions. The rest of the morning passed in tense silence. I worked on client projects while fielding texts from Aunt Maria about her specific vision for the auto shop flyers. By lunch, I'd added another unpaid project to my growing list, pushed back 2 paying clients, and missed another call from Jessica about the gallery showcase. That afternoon, as I worked on a logo design for a local restaurant, my laptop started overheating. The fan whirred loudly and the screen flickered ominously. I'd been putting off replacing it for months, using the money instead for household expenses and family obligations. No, 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 I whispered, frantically saving my work as the screen went black. Panic set in. My laptop wasn't just a tool, it was my livelihood. Without it, I couldn't work. Without work, I couldn't pay the bills that my parents depended on me to cover. I spent the next hour on the phone with tech support, learning that the repair would cost $400, money I didn't have. A new laptop would cost at least $800, equally impossible. When I explained the situation to my parents that evening, their response was predictable. Can't you borrow one from a friend? Miguel asked. Maybe this is a sign that you should focus on finding a real job, Victoria added. With benefits and security. Mrs. Rodriguez's daughter just got hired at the bank. I don't want to work at a bank, I said, exhaustion creeping into my voice. This is my real job. This is what I'm good at. Good at it or not, it's not reliable. Miguel finished his beer and reached for another. Real work means you can count on it. Like all your real jobs? The words escaped before I could stop them. The silence that followed was deafening. Miguel's face flushed red, and Victoria gasped as if I'd slapped her. How dare you? Miguel's voice was dangerously quiet. Everything I did was for this family. Every sacrifice, every failed business, it was all for you and your mother. And look how you repay us, Victoria added, fresh tears beginning to fall. Throwing our struggles in our faces. Making us feel small because we're not as educated as you. I stood up from the table, frustration boiling over. That's not what I'm doing. I'm just tired of being the only one holding this family together while you criticize everything I do. Holding us together? Miguel slammed his beer bottle on the table. We held this family together for 28 years before you started making money. Don't forget who raised you, who fed you, who put a roof over your head. With whose money? I shot back. For the past 3 years, I've been paying for that roof. I've been buying the groceries, covering the utilities, bailing you out of every financial mess you create. The words hung in the air like smoke after an explosion. I'd said the thing we all knew but never acknowledged. I'd broken the unspoken rule that kept our dysfunctional family functioning. Victoria stood up slowly, her face pale. If that's how you really feel, maybe it's time you found somewhere else to live. My heart stopped. What? You heard her, Miguel's voice was cold. If we're such a burden, if taking care of your family is such a hardship, maybe you should find people who appreciate you more. I looked between them, searching for any sign that this was just another guilt trip, another manipulation tactic. But their faces were stone, united in their rejection. You don't mean that, I whispered. Pack your things, Victoria said, turning away. I won't have my own daughter speak to us like we're charity cases. I stood there for a moment, mind reeling. Then, slowly, I walked to my room and closed the door. My hands shook as I pulled out the old suitcase I'd used for college, the one I'd brought home 4 years ago when I'd moved back to help them through Miguel's business failure. As I packed my clothes, my art supplies, and my broken laptop, I tried to process what had just happened. They'd thrown me out. After years of sacrificing my dreams, my independence, my own future for their stability, they discarded me the moment I'd asked for the same consideration they demanded from me. I zipped up my suitcase and looked around the tiny room that had been my prison and my sanctuary. The artwork on the walls seemed to mock me now, all those dreams I'd put on hold, all those opportunities I'd let slip away because family came first. My phone buzzed. A text from Jessica. Last chance to submit for the showcase. Deadline is midnight. Please tell me you're going for it. I stared at the message, then looked at my packed suitcase. For the first time in 3 years, I didn't have a household to manage, bills to pay, or parents to please. For the first time since college, I was free to make my own choices. I picked up my portfolio and walked out of the apartment, leaving behind the only life I'd ever known. I didn't look back. Jessica's apartment in Brooklyn felt like stepping into another world. Clean lines, minimalist furniture, and walls covered with actual art instead of family photos and guilt trips. She opened the door at 11 p.m., took one look at my tear-stained face and suitcase, and pulled me inside without a word. "Wine or coffee?" she asked, as if finding your best friend homeless at midnight was completely normal. "Both," I managed, collapsing onto her couch. As I told her what had happened, Jessica listened without judgment, occasionally refilling my wine glass or squeezing my hand. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. "You know what the crazy part is?" she finally said. "I'm proud of you." I looked at her like she'd lost her mind. Proud? I just got kicked out of my own home. I'm literally homeless. No, you finally stood up for yourself. Do you know how long I've been waiting for this moment? I must have looked confused because she continued. "Elena, for 3 years I've watched you disappear piece by piece. The girl who used to paint until sunrise, who had big dreams and bigger talent, she's been slowly dying. And tonight she finally fought back. I wanted to argue, to defend my parents, to fall back into the familiar pattern of making excuses for their behavior. But sitting in Jessica's apartment, away from the constant tension and criticism, I could finally see clearly. They really threw me out, I said, the reality hitting me fresh. They showed you exactly who they are, Jessica said gently. The question is, what are you going to do about it? I spent the next hour uploading my portfolio to the gallery submission portal. My hands shook as I selected pieces I'd hidden away, artwork that represented the real me, not the dutiful daughter, not the family ATM, but the artist I'd always dreamed of being. At 11:58 p.m., I hit submit. At 11:59 p.m., my phone started buzzing with calls from my mother. I turned it off. The next morning, Jessica left for work with strict instructions for me to treat her apartment like my own. There's coffee in the kitchen, leftovers in the fridge, and absolutely no family drama allowed in this house, she said with a wink. For the first time in years, I had an entire day with no obligations, no crisis to manage, no one to take care of but myself. The silence felt strange, almost threatening. I kept expecting someone to need something from me. Instead, I made coffee, opened my laptop, which had mysteriously started working again, and began working on my own projects. A painting series I'd started in college but never finished. Character designs for a graphic novel I'd sketched out but never pursued. Website mock-ups for the design studio I'd always dreamed of opening. By noon, I'd accomplished more personal creative work than I had in the previous 6 months combined. My phone, when I finally turned it back on, showed 17 missed calls and 43 text messages. I scrolled through them, watching the escalation from concern to anger to manipulation. "Mija, please call me. We need to talk." Victoria, 8 a.m. "Your mother is worried sick. Come home." Miguel, 9 a.m. "I don't know what got into you last night, but this has gone on long enough." Victoria, 上午10点. "Stop being dramatic and come home. We have bills to pay." Miguel, 上午11点. The final message, sent just an hour ago, made my blood run cold. I'm having chest pains. I think it's my heart. I need you. Victoria. My hands started shaking. This was my worst fear, the weapon they'd never used but I'd always dreaded. What if something really was wrong? What if my mother was having a heart attack while I sat in Brooklyn drinking coffee and pursuing my selfish dreams? I was halfway to calling an Uber when Jessica's words from the night before echoed in my mind. They showed you exactly who they are. Instead of rushing home, I called my cousin Maria, not Aunt Maria who needed the free flyers, but my cousin Maria who lived 2 blocks from my parents and had always been the family truth teller. Elena, I heard about the fight. How are you holding up? Maria, is my mom okay? She texted that she's having chest pains. There was a pause. Chest pains? I literally just saw her at the grocery store an hour ago. She seemed fine to me. Actually, she seemed more angry than anything else. The relief was overwhelming, followed immediately by a rage so pure it took my breath away. They were using my love for them as a weapon, manufacturing emergencies to drag me back into their dysfunction. Thanks, Maria. I'll call you later. I blocked their numbers. That afternoon, I walked through Prospect Park, really seeing it for the first time in years. Families picnicked on the grass, artists sketched under trees, couples walked hand in hand without checking their phones every 5 minutes for family emergencies. This was what peace looked like. That evening, Jessica came home with Thai takeout and news. The gallery called, she said, barely containing her excitement. They want to meet with you tomorrow. I stared at her. What? Your submission, Elena. They loved it. They want to discuss including 3 pieces in the showcase. For a moment, I couldn't process the words. After years of being told my art was a hobby, a distraction, unrealistic, someone wanted to display it. Someone saw value in the work I'd created. I started crying. Not the guilty, frustrated tears I'd become accustomed to, but tears of pure relief and joy. This is just the beginning, Jessica said, hugging me tight. This is what happens when you choose yourself. That night, as I lay on Jessica's couch staring at the ceiling, I thought about the 28 years I'd spent trying to earn love that should have been freely given. I thought about all the opportunities I'd passed up, all the dreams I'd deferred, all the pieces of myself I'd sacrificed on the altar of family obligation. Tomorrow I would meet with the gallery. Tomorrow I would start building the life I'd always wanted but never dared to pursue. Tonight I was finally free. The gallery was smaller than I'd imagined, tucked between a bookstore and a vintage clothing shop in the village. But walking through its doors felt like stepping into my future. The walls were clean and white, professionally lit, displaying the kind of art I'd only dreamed of creating space for. Elena? A woman in her 40s approached, extending her hand. I'm Catherine Wells, the curator. Thank you for coming. Catherine had kind eyes and an easy smile, the kind of person who made you feel immediately comfortable. As she led me through the gallery, explaining their vision for the emerging artists showcase, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years: possibility. Your work has a raw honesty that's rare, she said, stopping in front of a large abstract piece by another artist. Especially your self-portrait series. There's pain there, but also resilience. Hope emerging from darkness. I knew exactly which pieces she meant. I'd painted them during my darkest moments over the past 2 years, late at night when the weight of everyone else's expectations felt crushing. They were the most personal work I'd ever created, and I'd never shown them to anyone. We'd like to feature 3 pieces, Catherine continued. The opening is in 6 weeks. There will be collectors, critics, other artists. It's a real opportunity to establish yourself in the art world. As she spoke, my phone buzzed insistently in my pocket. I ignored it. There is one thing, Catherine said, her expression becoming more serious. This showcase is about authentic voices, artists who are speaking their truth. If we're going to represent your work, we need to know you're committed to your artistic journey. That you're not going to disappear back into whatever situation was holding you back. I thought about my parents' apartment, about the stack of unpaid bills on their kitchen counter, about the 100 ways they would try to guilt me into returning. Then I looked around the gallery at the life I could build if I was brave enough to claim it. "I'm committed," I said. That afternoon, I sat in a coffee shop and finally dealt with my phone. 23 missed calls, 67 text messages, and 2 voicemails. The messages had evolved from fake emergencies to anger to threats. "The electric bill is overdue. We'll be in the dark because of your selfishness. Miguel. Your cousin's baby shower is next week. How do I explain that my own daughter won't come? Victoria. You're breaking your mother's heart. Is this what we raised you for? Miguel. Fine. Don't come home. But don't expect us to welcome you back when your little art fantasy falls apart. Victoria." The last message made me laugh out loud. They still thought this was a phase, a rebellion that would burn out when I realized I needed them more than they needed me. They had no idea that I was just getting started. I spent the next 2 weeks creating a life I'd never dared to imagine. Jessica helped me find a small studio apartment in Park Slope, nothing fancy, but it was mine. I sold some of my photography equipment and took on a few quick freelance projects to cover the deposit and first month's rent. For the first time since college, I had a space that belonged entirely to me. No family photos staring down at me with disapproval. No constant interruptions or demands. Just clean walls, good light, and silence that felt like sanctuary instead of abandonment. I painted with an intensity I'd forgotten I possessed. The work that emerged was different from anything I'd created before, bolder, more honest, angrier. I painted family dinners where one person's plate was empty. I painted telephone wires that looked like chains. I painted a woman walking away from a house that was literally draining the color from her body. 3 weeks after moving into my new apartment, I ran into Mrs. Chen from my parents' building at the grocery store. She looked embarrassed when she saw me, fidgeting with her shopping cart. "Elena, how are you? Your parents, they said you moved far away for work." "Something like that," I said carefully. She leaned closer, lowering her voice. "Your mother, she asked me to help move furniture last week. When I asked where you were, she said you were too busy with your career to help family anymore." Mrs. Chin shook her head. "I told her I remember all those times you helped me, never asked for anything. Good daughters shouldn't have to earn their place in the family." After she walked away, I stood in the produce section for a long time, processing her words. They were rewriting history, painting me as the ungrateful daughter who'd abandoned them for selfish ambition. But Mrs. Chen remembered the truth, and that meant others would too. That evening, I made a decision that would have been unthinkable a month earlier. I started documenting my story. Not for revenge or public sympathy, but for clarity. I needed to see the patterns laid out clearly, to understand how I'd become trapped in a cycle of giving without receiving, of loving without being valued. I wrote about the years of paying their bills while being criticized for not contributing enough. I wrote about the guilt trips that followed every attempt at independence. I wrote about the way my dreams had been dismissed as fantasies while their failures were treated as tragedies beyond their control. As I wrote, the truth became undeniable. I hadn't abandoned my family. I'd escaped a situation that was slowly killing my spirit. The gallery showcase was 2 weeks away when I received an unexpected visitor. I was painting in my apartment, lost in the flow of color and emotion, when someone knocked on my door. Through the peephole, I saw Maria, my cousin, not my aunt. She looked nervous, glancing around like she was afraid of being followed. "Elena? It's Maria. Can we talk?" I opened the door and she rushed inside quickly. "I can't stay long," she said. "But I had to see you. To tell you what's really going on." She told me about the family meetings that had been happening since I left. How my parents had painted me as unstable, selfish, in need of intervention. How they'd asked relatives to contact me to convince me to come home before I ruined my life completely. "But I know the truth," Maria said quietly. "I've seen how they treated you. How they took advantage of your kindness. Some of us have always known." She handed me an envelope. "This is from your grandmother, your father's mother. She asked me to give it to you. Inside was a handwritten letter in my grandmother's careful script. Mija, your cousin told me what happened. I want you to know that leaving was the right choice. I watched my son and his wife take advantage of your generous heart for too long. A family that only loves you for what you can give them is not a real family. Build your own life, sweetheart. You deserve to be happy. I cried reading it, not from sadness but from relief. Someone in my family understood. Someone saw me as more than just a resource to be exploited. There's something else, Maria said. They're planning something for the holidays. Some kind of public reconciliation attempt. They want to make you look like the villain who abandoned her sick parents during Christmas. My stomach clenched. What kind of attempt? I don't know exactly. But be careful, Elena. They're not ready to let you go. After Maria left, I sat in my apartment surrounded by my paintings, my truth told in color and light. In 2 weeks, these pieces would hang in a gallery, telling my story to strangers who might see beauty in my pain, hope in my struggle. My parents thought they could control the narrative, paint me as the ungrateful daughter who'd chosen strangers over family. But they didn't understand the power of truth or the strength that comes from finally choosing yourself. I picked up my paintbrush and returned to work. I had a story to finish telling. The opening night arrived like a long-awaited sunrise. I stood in front of my bathroom mirror, applying lipstick with hands that only trembled slightly. The woman looking back at me was someone I barely recognized, confident, purposeful, free of the constant anxiety that had been my companion for years. My 3 pieces hung in the gallery's main room: Inherited Guilt, the family dinner with the empty plate, Breaking Point, the woman walking away from the color-draining house, and Phoenix Rising, a self-portrait emerging from ashes that, upon closer inspection, were made of torn bills and family photographs. Jessica arrived early to help me prepare, wearing a black dress and the biggest smile I'd ever seen on her face. "You ready for this?" she asked, straightening my necklace. "As ready as I'll ever be," I said, though my stomach was doing gymnastics. "Elena," she grabbed my hands, forcing me to look at her. "Whatever happens tonight, you've already won. You chose yourself. You chose your art. You chose freedom. Everything else is just bonus." The gallery filled quickly. I watched from across the room as people stopped in front of my paintings, reading the small plaques that described each piece. Some nodded knowingly. Others looked uncomfortable, perhaps recognizing their own family dynamics in my work. Catherine introduced me to collectors, critics, and other artists. With each conversation, I felt more solid, more real. These people saw me as an artist, not as someone's disappointing daughter or financial safety net. "Your work speaks to something universal," said Dr. Rebecca Mason, a psychology professor who collected art about family trauma. "The courage it takes to break generational patterns, to choose healing over familiarity, that's powerful stuff." Around 9 p.m., as the evening was reaching its peak, I noticed a commotion near the entrance. My heart stopped when I saw them, Victoria and Miguel, dressed in their best clothes, looking lost and angry in the sophisticated gallery space. They'd found me. I watched from across the room as they approached my paintings, Victoria's face growing more horrified with each piece she viewed. Miguel stood stiffly beside her, his jaw clenched in the way that meant he was barely containing his rage. Other gallery visitors began to notice them too, sensing the tension radiating from the couple standing too close to the artwork, whispering harshly to each other. "Elena Maria Martinez," Victoria's voice cut across the refined murmur of the gallery. "What is this nonsense?" The room went quiet. All eyes turned to us as Victoria marched toward me, Miguel following like a storm cloud. "How dare you?" she hissed, close enough now that I could smell her perfume, the same floral scent that had been the backdrop of my childhood. "How dare you put our family business on display for strangers to judge?" "Mrs. Martinez," Catherine appeared beside me, her voice professionally calm but firm. "This is a private event. If you're not on the guest list." "I'm her mother," Victoria snapped. "I don't need to be on any list." "Actually, you do," I said, finding my voice. It was steadier than I'd expected. This is my event and you're not welcome here. Miguel stepped closer, his voice low and threatening. You will not speak to your mother that way. Not in front of all these people. I looked around the gallery. Art collectors, fellow artists, critics, Jessica, all watching this confrontation play out. 6 months ago, I would have been mortified, desperate to smooth things over and avoid public embarrassment. Now I felt something different. Clarity. These paintings, I said, loud enough for everyone to hear, tell the truth about what it's like to be financially and emotionally exploited by the people who claim to love you. If you're embarrassed by them, maybe you should examine why. Victoria's face flushed red. Exploited? We raised you, fed you, put a roof over your head for 28 years. And this is how you repay us? By making us look like monsters? I didn't make you look like anything, I replied. I just painted my experience. Your experience? Miguel's voice was getting louder, drawing more attention. Your experience of what? Having everything handed to you? Never going without? Having parents who sacrificed everything for your comfort? Dr. Mason stepped forward, her professional demeanor intact. Excuse me, but I'm curious about your perspective. In your daughter's artist statement, she mentions paying household expenses for 3 years, covering medical bills, and supporting the family financially while pursuing her career. Is that accurate? Victoria's mouth opened and closed like a fish. That's not, she lived with us. Of course she contributed. Contributed or supported? Dr. Mason pressed gently. There's a significant difference. The crowd had grown larger, other conversations stopping as people tuned into this real-life drama playing out in front of the art that depicted it. This is ridiculous, Miguel said, grabbing Victoria's arm. We're not going to stand here and be interrogated by strangers. Elena, you have until tomorrow to come home and take this garbage down. Or you're no longer our daughter. The ultimatum hung in the air like smoke. For a moment, I was 8 years old again, desperate for their approval, terrified of their rejection. Then I looked at my paintings, my truth hanging on the gallery walls for everyone to see. I thought about my tiny apartment where I could paint in peace. I thought about the collector who'd already expressed interest in purchasing Breaking Point. I'm not coming home, I said clearly. And these paintings stay up. Victoria gasped as if I'd struck her. Fine. But don't come crying to us when your little art fantasy falls apart. When you realize that strangers don't love you like family does. You're right, I said, my voice growing stronger with each word. Strangers don't love me like family does. They love me better. They see my worth without expecting me to prove it every day. They celebrate my success instead of resenting it. They don't use my love as a weapon against me. The silence that followed was deafening. Victoria's face crumpled, but for the first time her tears didn't move me. Miguel's anger seemed to deflate, leaving him looking smaller, older. We're done here, he said finally, taking Victoria's arm. Don't contact us again. I won't, I replied. As they walked toward the exit, Victoria turned back one last time. You'll regret this, Elena. Family is all you have in the end. No, I said, looking around at the room full of people who'd witnessed my parents' behavior and were now looking at me with respect, admiration, and understanding. Love is all you have in the end. And real love doesn't come with conditions. After they left, the gallery erupted in quiet conversations. Several people approached me with stories of their own family struggles, with praise for my courage, with genuine interest in my work. That, said Catherine, appearing at my side with a glass of wine, was the most authentic artist statement I've ever witnessed. By the end of the evening, all 3 of my pieces had sold. Dr. Mason purchased Inherited Guilt for her private collection. A young woman who'd grown up in a similar situation bought Breaking Point. And Phoenix Rising was acquired by the gallery itself for their permanent collection. As Jessica and I walked home through the Brooklyn streets, I felt lighter than I had in years. How do you feel? She asked. Free, I said without hesitation. Terrified but free. Good, she smiled. That's exactly how courage feels. The weeks following the gallery opening passed in a blur of opportunities I'd never dared to imagine. The review and art forum called my work a visceral exploration of family trauma and self-liberation. A collector in Miami commissioned a piece for his foundation's domestic abuse awareness campaign. 2 other galleries reached out about future shows. More importantly, I was painting every day. The constant anxiety that had plagued me for years, the waiting for the next crisis, the hypervigilance for family emergencies had lifted. In its place was something I'd almost forgotten existed: peace. My apartment had transformed from a sparse refuge into a real home. Plants on the windowsills, books on shelves, my own artwork on the walls. For the first time since college, I was living in a space that reflected who I actually was, not who I needed to be for other people's comfort. But healing, I learned, isn't linear. 6 weeks after the gallery opening, on a gray February morning, I found myself standing outside my old building in Queens. I hadn't planned to come here. I'd been visiting a client in the neighborhood and suddenly found myself on familiar streets, muscle memory guiding my feet toward the apartment that had been both home and prison for 3 years. The building looked smaller than I remembered, more rundown. Paint peeling from the fire escape, trash scattered around the entrance. Had it always been this depressing, or was I seeing it clearly for the first time? I was about to leave when I saw her, Mrs. Rodriguez from 3B, my parents' next-door neighbor, struggling with grocery bags and a broken elevator. "Elena!" she called out, her face lighting up with genuine warmth. "Mija, how are you? We've missed seeing you around here." "I'm good, Mrs. Rodriguez. Really good. Here, let me help you with those." As we climbed the stairs together, she filled me in on building gossip. "The Johnsons got a new baby. Mr. Kim finally fixed his motorcycle. The landlord was raising rent again. And your parents," she said carefully, "they've been struggling." I paused on the landing. Struggling how? "Well, the utilities got shut off twice last month. Your father had some kind of accident at a job site, nothing serious, but he's been laid up. Your mother, she's been asking neighbors for help with groceries." The familiar guilt tried to claw its way up my throat. The voice I'd spent months silencing whispered, "See? They need you. You abandoned them when they needed you most." "Mrs. Rodriguez," I said carefully, "did they mention that they kicked me out? That they told me not to come back?" Her face fell. "No, Mija. They told everyone you moved away for work. That you were too busy with your new life to visit." Of course they had. Rewriting history was easier than admitting they'd driven away the daughter who'd been keeping them afloat. "The truth is," I said gently, "they asked me to leave because I asked for some basic respect and appreciation. I'd been paying most of their bills for 3 years and they still treated me like a burden." Mrs. Rodriguez stopped walking. Elena. I'm so sorry. I had no idea." "It's not your fault. They're very good at controlling the narrative." As we reached her floor, Mrs. Rodriguez hugged me tightly. "You look happy, Mija. Healthier. Sometimes we have to choose ourselves even when it's hard." Walking back down those stairs, I felt a strange combination of sadness and relief. Sadness for the parents who'd chosen their pride over their daughter, who were struggling because they'd rejected the help they desperately needed. Relief that their struggles were no longer mine to solve. I'd learned to tell the difference between guilt and grief. Guilt was the weapon they'd used to control me. Grief was what I felt for the family we could have been if they'd been capable of love without conditions. That evening, I called my grandmother, Miguel's mother, who'd sent me the letter through Maria. At 83, she had a clarity that came from decades of watching her family's patterns repeat. "Abuela, I saw Mrs. Rodriguez today. She says Mom and Dad are having a hard time." "Sí, mija. I know." Part of me feels like I should help. There was a long pause. "Elena, do you remember the story I used to tell you about the scorpion and the frog?" I did. The scorpion asks the frog to carry him across the river, promising not to sting. Halfway across, the scorpion stings the frog anyway. When the dying frog asks why, the scorpion says, "It's my nature." "Your parents," Abuela continued. They are like the scorpion. They will take your help and then they will sting you for helping. Not because they are evil, but because it is their nature. They do not know how to receive love without resenting it. But they're struggling. They were struggling when you lived there too, Mija. The only difference is that now you're not drowning with them. After we hung up, I sat in my studio looking at my latest painting, a woman planting a garden in soil that had been scorched by fire. It was about the slow work of rebuilding after destruction, about choosing growth over familiar pain. I thought about my parents, probably sitting in their darkened apartment, too proud to ask for help from the daughter they'd discarded. I felt sorry for them, but I didn't feel responsible for them. There's a difference between compassion and obligation, between love and sacrifice. That night, I wrote them a letter I would never send. I hope someday you understand that leaving wasn't about punishing you, it was about saving myself. I hope you find peace with the choices you made. I hope you learn to build relationships based on love instead of need. But I can't wait for that transformation anymore. I can't sacrifice my future for your comfort. I am not your safety net anymore. I am not your retirement plan. I am not the daughter who will set herself on fire to keep you warm. I am an artist. I am a woman building her own life. I am someone who finally learned that love without respect isn't love at all. I hope you're happy. But your happiness is no longer my responsibility. I folded the letter and put it in my desk drawer, next to photos from the gallery opening and reviews of my work. Evidence of the life I'd built from the ashes of the one I'd left behind. Outside my window, Brooklyn sparkled in the winter darkness. Somewhere in those lights were other artists, other dreamers, other people who'd chosen courage over comfort. My tribe wasn't bound by blood, it was bound by shared values, mutual respect, and the kind of love that celebrated growth instead of demanding stagnation. I picked up my paintbrush and began working on a new piece. This one was about joy, pure, uncomplicated joy that didn't come at anyone else's expense. For the first time in my life, I was painting my future instead of processing my past. The morning light streams through the large windows of my new studio space in Williamsburg. It's bigger than my first apartment, with high ceilings and white walls that showcase my work perfectly. I share the building with 6 other artists, and the creative energy here is unlike anything I'd ever experienced. I'm putting the finishing touches on a piece for my first solo show when my phone rings. It's Catherine from the gallery. Elena, I have news, she says, barely containing her excitement. The Times wants to do a feature on you. About your work, your story, how art can be a tool for healing from family trauma. I set down my brush and smile. A year ago, I was hiding my truth, ashamed of my family's dysfunction, convinced that speaking up would make me a bad daughter. Now, my story is being recognized as something valuable, something that might help other people in similar situations. That's amazing, I say. When do they want to interview me? After we discuss the details, I hang up and look around my studio. Canvases in various stages of completion line the walls. My latest series, Chosen Family, explores the relationships we build based on love and respect rather than obligation and guilt. There's a piece about Jessica, who stood by me through my darkest moments. One about my grandmother, whose letter gave me permission to choose myself. Another about Dr. Mason, who saw value in my pain and helped me transform it into art. And one about Catherine, who took a chance on an unknown artist with a complicated story. These are the people who taught me what real love looks like. Love that celebrates your growth instead of fearing it. Love that supports your dreams instead of dismissing them. Love that sees you as a whole person, not just a source of comfort or convenience. My phone buzzes with a text from Maria. Saw your piece in last month's art forum. So proud of you. Mom and Dad are doing okay, by the way. Dad got a steady job, Mom's taking care of herself. They ask about you sometimes. I feel a small pang reading this, not guilt, but something softer. Wistfulness, maybe. I hope they're truly doing well. I hope they've learned to build a life that doesn't depend on exploiting someone else's generosity. But their wellness isn't my responsibility anymore. I text back, I'm glad they're okay. Thanks for letting me know. Around noon, Jessica stops by with coffee and pastries from the bakery downstairs. She's become my closest friend, the sister I chose rather than inherited. "How's the piece coming?" she asks, studying my latest work. "Good. Different. Hopeful." She nods, understanding immediately. My early work was about breaking free from toxicity. My current work is about what comes after, the slow, beautiful process of building a life based on your own values instead of other people's expectations. "You know what I love most about your art now?" Jessica says, settling into the reading chair I keep in the corner of the studio. "What?" "It's not angry anymore. It's powerful." She's right. The rage that fueled my first successful pieces has transformed into something more sustainable, clarity. I paint with purpose now, not just pain. My work explores themes of healing, chosen family, personal sovereignty, and the courage it takes to live authentically. That afternoon, I walk through Prospect Park, something I do most days now. It's become my meditation, my way of staying grounded in the present instead of spiraling into anxiety about family emergencies that are no longer mine to solve. I pass families having picnics and I don't feel the sharp pang of loss I used to. Instead, I see the complexity. Some of these families are probably healthy and loving, others might be struggling with their own dysfunction. The difference is that now I can observe without feeling responsible for fixing anything. My phone rings as I'm walking. Unknown number with a Queens area code. For a moment, my heart rate spikes. Old habits die hard. But I don't answer. If it's important, they'll leave a voicemail. If it's my parents trying to reconnect, they can put their words in writing first. I've learned to protect my peace. The voicemail notification comes through a few minutes later. I listen to it when I get home. "Hi Elena, this is Dr. Sarah Chen from Queens Community College. I got your number from your grandmother. We're starting a new program for adult students from challenging family backgrounds, and we'd love to have you speak about your experience as an artist who overcame family trauma. If you're interested, please call me back." I save the message. Speaking to other people who are struggling with similar situations feels like the natural next step in my journey. Not as someone who has all the answers, but as someone who found a way through. That evening, I video chat with my grandmother. At 84, she's learned to use technology to stay connected with the grandchildren who matter to her. "Mija, you look so good," she says, her weathered face crinkling into a smile. "So peaceful." "I feel peaceful, abuela. Most days." "And your art? You're still painting?" "Every day. Actually, I have some news." I tell her about the New York Times feature, about the speaking opportunity, about the solo show that's been in the works. Mija," she says, tears in her eyes. "I am so proud of you. You did what I never could, you chose yourself. It wasn't easy. The best things never are. But look at you now. Look at the life you built." After we hang up, I sit in my living room, a space filled with art, books, plants, and evidence of a life lived on my own terms. The silence isn't empty anymore. It's full of possibility. I think about the girl I was a year ago, frantically managing other people's crises while neglecting her own dreams. She was so afraid of being alone that she accepted love with conditions, support with strings attached, family that felt more like obligation than joy. That girl couldn't have imagined this life. The freedom to create without interruption. The respect of peers who see her as an artist, not just someone's disappointing daughter. The peace that comes from relationships built on choice rather than biology. I'm not angry at my parents anymore. Anger was exhausting, and it kept me tied to them in a way that prevented real healing. Instead, I feel something more complex, compassion for people who are too damaged to love without hurting, and gratitude for the pain that forced me to grow. They taught me what I didn't want in a family. From that knowledge, I built what I did want: relationships based on respect, support without strings, love that celebrates rather than diminishes. As I get ready for bed, I pass the small altar I've created in my bedroom, photos of people who've shaped my journey toward authenticity. Jessica laughing at my first gallery opening. My grandmother at her birthday party last year. Catherine presenting me with my first real art review. Dr. Mason at a panel discussion we did together about art and healing. These are my chosen family. They are the people who see my worth without expecting me to prove it daily. They celebrate my successes without feeling diminished by them. They love me enough to want me to grow, even if that growth sometimes means changing in ways that make me different from who I was before. Tomorrow I'll paint again. Tomorrow I'll continue building the life I was always meant to live. Tomorrow I'll keep choosing myself, not because I'm selfish, but because I've finally learned that you can't pour from an empty cup. I am Elena Martinez. I am 29 years old. I am an artist, a survivor, a woman who learned that sometimes the most radical act of love is setting yourself free. And for the first time in my life, that is enough. Sometimes walking away from toxic family isn't abandonment, it's survival. Sometimes choosing yourself isn't selfish, it's the first step toward building the life you deserve. Have you ever had to choose between family loyalty and personal well-being? I'd love to hear your story. Remember, you are not responsible for managing other people's emotions, solving their financial problems, or sacrificing your dreams to maintain their comfort. Real love doesn't come with conditions. Family isn't just about blood, it's about respect, support, and genuine care for each other's well-being. And sometimes the family you choose is healthier than the one you were born into. Stay strong. Stay true to yourself. Your dreams matter too.